When it comes to hormone imbalance, it can get really confusing really fast when it comes to what supplements should you take. Because each hormone imbalance is going to take a little something different, and you really want to be sure that you're on the right supplements depending on what hormone imbalance you have. So if you head over to karenmartel.com/shop, you're going to see my new support kits for women's hormone imbalances. We've got ones for insulin resistance, so it's the insulin support kit. We've got the thyroid support kit, which, yes, you guessed it, is for women with hypothyroidism and that need support for their thyroid. We've got the adrenal repair kit for women with low cortisol, and we have the Be Calm kit for women with high cortisol. These kits have everything that you need in order to help support these imbalances and help repair them. So right now, all of our kits are on sale, and each of them come with a free 30-day meal plan. So that's karenmartel.com/shop, and that's our women's wellness store and our hormone support kits. All right, let's get to our show. You're listening to The Other Side of Weight Loss. I'm your host, Karen Martel, transformational nutrition coach and expert in women's weight loss and hormone health. If you are ready to go beyond diet and exercise, then tune in each week to hear from leading experts in psychology, nutrition, and spirituality as we explore the many avenues of what it really takes to lose weight and feel your best. 77% of people experience stress that affects their physical health. 73% of people have stress that impacts their mental health. And 48% of people have trouble sleeping because of stress. Stress can contribute to heart disease, asthma, obesity, diabetes, headaches, depression, anxiety, gastrointestinal problems, Alzheimer's, accelerated aging, and premature death. Over time, stress takes a toll on everything from thyroid, sex hormone issues, insulin resistance. We begin to experience issues such as sleep issues, like trouble falling asleep or staying asleep, low sex drive, chronic brain fog, poor immune system, weight gain, and of course, weight loss resistance, mood disturbances, fatigue, frequent injuries, and poor exercise recovery. Now, doesn't that just raise your stress levels just hearing all of that? So pretty much stress can affect everything in your system. All of the leading causes of death, stress contributes to. At the time of this recording, we are amidst the COVID-19 pandemic. And let me tell you, stress is at an all-time high for the majority of the world right now. And as hard as it is to keep our stress levels low, I want everyone to hear and understand why we need to make stress not just right now, but always a top priority to control. Because stress literally affects absolutely everything in our body. And not only that, it affects everything in our lives. It affects our relationships. It affects our relationships with our kids, with our spouses, with our family members, with our friends. It affects our levels of happiness. It affects our resilience in life, our jobs, our job productivity, everything stress can affect. And let me tell you, it has the biggest impact on our weight and our ability to lose weight. If you are highly stressed, your body cannot lose weight. In this two-part series on stress, you are going to learn exactly what is going on inside your body when it comes to stress. What, for women specifically, are our biggest stressors, the impact of stress on our hormonal system, and why it has such a huge impact on weight, And finally, my number one tips for combating stress, besides the typical advice like meditation, and even the most busiest, most highly stressed women can do what I'm going to tell them in order to lower their stress levels starting immediately. And it's likely not something you have heard of before. First off, what is stress? I mean, we hear that word, it's thrown around constantly right now, but let's really discuss what the heck stress is, because it's far more, I should say, what you think it is. Now, I'm sure many of you by now have heard about the hormone cortisol. Production of the hormone cortisol, you've probably heard me talk about cortisol quite a bit. Production of the hormone cortisol is natural and healthy response to acute stress. But when stress becomes chronic, levels of cortisol go up and stay up. Naturally, stress was meant to go up and come back down when the stress disappeared. Most women in their 20s can tolerate stress much better because they don't tend to have the same levels of stress as us older ladies do. But mostly because as we age, our ability to tolerate stress decreases, and over time, there is a cumulative effect to our stress. I mean, think back to what you could do to your system back in your 20s compared to now in your 40s, 50s, and 60s. It's pretty different. Personally, I worked at bars throughout my whole 20s. I traveled like crazy. I drank way too much. I partied way too much. And I'm like most people, I could bounce back pretty darn easy. We would do this like 3, 4, 5, 7 days a week at times, and stay up till like 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, jump up and do it all over again. And I'm sure many of you can relate to that, where it was just like, that's what you did when you were in your 20s. At least that's what you did if you were me in your 20s. And I personally did some version of this fun, which I thought it was fun back then, for a good probably 10, 15 years of my life. And it wasn't until I had my first child did it all catch up to me, when my cortisol levels finally crashed. And they were like, you know what, Karen, screw you. We can't handle this anymore. And many women I talk to they just have similar stories where it's like, I used to go in my 20s. I could party all night and survive on 4 hours of sleep. I would stay slim and somewhat sane. And for many of you, would go to university. I was going through intense schooling through a lot of my party years, unfortunately. But many of you did the same thing. You were going to university or college while partying all night and not getting enough sleep, and doing this for years on end. Well, suddenly I had children and I couldn't lose weight. I had severe insomnia. My nervous system felt like it was completely fried. I couldn't handle anything. And even to this day, many years later, if I have less than 8 hours of sleep, I am a complete wreck. It's like devastating to me if I sleep less than 8 hours, because my body can't handle it anymore. Many years ago, this state was once called adrenal fatigue, and I'm sure you've heard that statement. Adrenals are two glands that sit on top of your kidneys. For the sciencey peeps, the biochemistry peeps out there, just quickly, I will explain how this works. In times of stress, your brain is the first responder. Specifically, the hypothalamus, a small region in your brain, releases corticotropin-releasing hormone and stimulates what is called the anterior pituitary gland to produce adrenocorticotropic hormone. I know, I'm going to test you on this later, so don't forget that word. Which in turn causes the adrenal cortex, which is the outside of the adrenal gland, to produce cortisol. and the inside of the adrenal glands, the adrenal medulla, to produce two other hormones called catecholamines, which include dopamine, norepinephrine, and epinephrine, or adrenaline, as most people know of it. That's a very important fact to remember because we'll come back to that. It was once believed, and still is by many, that the chronically high levels of hormones depleted the adrenals of these hormones, and the adrenals got fatigued, worn out, and simply couldn't keep producing the stress hormones. Science, however, now tells us that this is not the case. We now know that the adrenal glands can go from being overactive, producing too much cortisol, straight into underactivity without going through a slow decline state like they once thought happened. It could happen that way, but not in the sense that they become tired. But instead, the body, being super smart, says, hey, these high levels of cortisol, this ain't good. This is not good for the system. So all of those years of partying and staying up too late, then having the stress of pregnancy and depleting my nutrition stores, the very many sleepless nights post pregnancy with the newborn, with zero help from anybody, and literally years of sleepless nights. My body finally went, you know what? We cannot stay in this high cortisol state. And that's when the body begins to down regulate cortisol. So instead of the old model of the adrenals getting worn out, they now say it actually lowers, the body's lowers on purpose your cortisol levels. For example, they have discovered that infections and chronic illness will downregulate the body's stress hormones. Now, I often see this in my practice where women aren't stressed, they live easy lives, they do yoga, they meditate, they eat well, no big outside stressors, but yet they are riddled with hormone dysfunction. Their cortisol tests levels show low cortisol levels, and they are wiped. And no matter what they do, they can't get out from under it. That's when they have to look at what else is it and what could it be. I look at underlying infections. Is there yeast overgrowth, leaky gut, parasites, small intestinal bacteria overgrowth, H. pylori? Is there heavy metal toxicity or mold toxicity, Lyme disease? Is there an autoimmune condition? All of these things can make the body down regulate cortisol. In a couple of studies where people that were in the hospital with bacterial infections had their baseline serum cortisol levels tested. These people all had baseline low levels of cortisol, adrenal insufficiency, or what's called adrenal fatigue. 2 weeks after they left the hospital, cured of their sepsis, they redid the same test. Their basal cortisol levels were back to normal in just 2 weeks because their sepsis had been cured. Oftentimes, doctors and naturopaths will tell you adrenal insufficiency takes a lot of supplements, lifestyle changes, and years of healing to go back to normal. When some people who have infections or some other internal stressor that simply needed to be cleaned up in order for the adrenals to go back to a healthy state of production. Now, there are other things, of course, that can cause cortisol dysregulation. It can absolutely be from life and just how stressful it can be. Women nowadays tend to take way too much on. We wear many hats, including being a provider for our family, just as much as men are. We tend to be the prominent caretaker of the home and of the children. We do more of the cleaning, we do more of the cooking, we do more of the manning of the children. Now, this isn't every household, but I just know that this is women's tendency to do more of these things than the man. The man has different parts too. I'm not slamming men here. They definitely, my husband has a lot of jobs that I do not care to do. So women, we are taking on a lot more than we used to. So we're not only taking on this kind of full-time job of cleaning, cooking, taking care of the children, but we're also working full-time and bringing in just as much income as our partners are. That's a lot. That is a lot more stress than we used to have on us. On top of that, women work out. Not to say men don't either, but we're just talking women here today. Women work out. We do a lot of cardio, uh, all of which tax the adrenals. So if you are a runner, a CrossFitter, an Orange Theory gal, you are chronically raising cortisol. And a lot of women don't realize that exercise raises cortisol, that this go, go, go attitude of attacking life, of I'm going to just wear all of these hats and do all of these things and be superwoman, all of these things are chronically raising cortisol. And you're going to see why that's a problem when we're finished this episode. Some other things that will raise cortisol. Caffeine. We all drink too much caffeine. I don't, but a lot of women drink too much caffeine. Excessive sugar intake raises cortisol. Lack of sleep. How many of you are lacking sleep? I really try not to, as I've told you before. I try and get my 8 hours up, preferably 9 or 10 every night. Artificial lighting, including LED lights, blue lights from your TV, computer, and phone. These are all stressors to the body. And I'm going to explain why. Excess alcohol consumption, smoking, drugs, all cortisol going up. EMF waves from the cell phones, from Bluetooth, stressors to the system. Calorie restriction, stress to the system. Fasting, stress to the system. Inflammation. Now it could be inflammation from having a poor diet, having chronic, autoimmune condition, having multiple different things can cause inflammation, but inflammation raises cortisol. So it's not just my life is stressful, I need to meditate sometimes. It is really multi-factor. And it is really necessary to lighten the stress load. But before we get into solutions and tools, I want to talk about why stress affects your weight. And just to be clear, stress hormones aren't a bad thing. I know it really sounds like it. It's like we want to run for the hills and never be stressed out ever again because it's such doomsday that I'm talking about here. But without stress, we wouldn't be alive. There would be no human race, right? Because it is our survival hormone. We have it so that our body can fight or flight in times of emergency, or if we were going to be attacked by the tiger, or there was a fire, or there was something, like you needed stress response in order to get yourself out of danger or fight your way through it so that the human race could survive. So remember that the right amount of stress is completely necessary. And without it, you don't do well. Either high cortisol or low cortisol is not a good thing. It's that Goldilocks. We want that perfect rhythmic cortisol levels throughout the day that we're supposed to have in order for everything else to run just as smoothly as it should. And I'd love to find the person that actually had that going on. I certainly don't. But we're all going to try here. After today's episode, we're all going to try. So cortisol and other stress hormones like adrenaline can be one of the biggest impacts on our weight and one of the number one causes of weight loss resistance. In one study of 41 women who were overweight and had their hip to waist ratio measured, were given a series of stressful tasks, and they measured their cortisol levels before, during, and after. The women with the higher hip to waist ratio secreted significantly more cortisol. They also took into consideration the women's psychological background and life stressors. The women with high hip to waist ratio were characterized by poor coping skills and differences in mood reactivity. High cortisol equaled more weight and less coping skills. So first off, just think about what your habits are when you're stressed out when it comes to the eating and the drinking. Right now, we're all locked inside our homes, wondering if the world is coming to an end, scared to leave our house. We are stressed and we are bored. So do we want to eat the salad? Do we want to eat the broccoli? Nope. We want the comfort food. We want sugar because sugar releases dopamine. And dopamine's a really feel-good hormone. It's the same hormone that's released when a person does drugs. Why do people do drugs and drink? Because they want to escape reality. They want to feel good. And sugar releases the same hormones. So if your life is stressful, you feel stressed day to day, your cravings for carbohydrates go up. Carbs, which convert to sugar in the body, causes the hormone insulin to be secreted. And through something called the plasma tryptophan ratio, increases serotonin levels. Serotonin helps with sleep onset, pain sensitivity, blood pressure regulation, and helps control mood. You've probably heard of serotonin because antidepressants are called serotonin reuptake inhibitors. So it has to do with getting the serotonin up. The people will call it our feel-good hormone, our feel-good. Same with tryptophan. Tryptophan is very calming. So tryptophan makes serotonin. So interesting fact, though, is protein does not have this mechanism to release serotonin. So the body seeks out carbs in order to feel better. Not the protein, not the vegetables. They don't have enough carbs in them. Not enough of the straight up sugar, give me the dopamine hit kind of carbs, which we all kind of know this, don't we, ladies? We don't tend to crave a steak when we're super stressed out. We tend to crave the cookies, the cake, the ice cream. So stress, high carb cravings go up, and our ability to choose wisely is much more difficult because your body is driving you to eat the carbs to pick up some more serotonin. So it's all for a reason. I just did an episode on overcoming overeating where I really dive deep into this and why we're so driven to eat the wrong types of food and why it's so hard not to if you're stressed out because you're seeking the dopamine rush. And just a little side note, prior to our period, ladies, if you're still cycling, serotonin levels drop, which is why we crave sweets during that time. So it's all for good reason. Now, this is not the only thing driving weight up, but it's a big one. I always know my stress levels are too high when my sugar cravings go up for too long. It's always my big red sign, like, oh, look at me, I've been craving sugar every single day for 3 weeks. I guess I can't really blame it on PMS anymore. And it must be my stress levels are too high. And I know then I need to get them in check. And I'll tell you right now, every time I do, when I see that happening, when I start to realize, oh, wait a second, I've been craving sugar for a long time now. Like not because I'll always just here and there crave sugar, especially certain times of the month. But if I'm chronically craving it every single day, I know I have let my stress levels get too high for too long, and I will immediately do something to get back in check so that the sugar cravings don't continue. And every time I do get it in check, and I've got different methods, I take certain supplements, I just take time off, I restrict the hours that I work. I do take a weekend holiday with my husband, go on a date, whatever. Do something that's for me, that just brings my stress levels down, reconnects me to life. The sugar cravings always go away. So when the cortisol levels increase, the cells of our body can become resistant to insulin, which increases weight and eventually can cause type 2 diabetes. This is because every time cortisol goes up, the body releases glucose by tapping into protein stores via gluconeogenesis in the liver. This is great to give you the energy to fight or run, but if you have chronically elevated cortisol, well, now you have chronically elevated blood sugar levels, which can lead to insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes. Now, chronically high or low cortisol levels are one of the biggest causes of insomnia. Now, whether it's you can't fall asleep or you may be able to fall asleep, but then you get up at 2 or 3 or 4 a.m. and can't get back to sleep. This can also be from cortisol going too high at the wrong times, leading to a bad night's sleep. Chronic sleep deprivation drives hunger up and drives cravings up, which in turn causes you to overeat on the wrong foods. Cortisol has a very, very close, very tight relationship with your thyroid. So even if you don't have hypothyroidism, it doesn't mean that your cortisol levels could be affecting your thyroid, even if you don't have hypothyroidism. Your body needs just the right amount of cortisol to function properly. Excess cortisol suppresses TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone, secretion. TSH is a hormone produced by the brain that tells the thyroid to make more thyroid hormone. In essence, the excess cortisol inhibits the thyroid from making more thyroid hormones. On the flip side, when cortisol is low, TSH levels are shown to increase, which is a sign of poorly functioning thyroid. Additionally, low levels also decrease free T3 levels, which is the active form of the hormone. Now, reverse T3 is an inactive form of the hormone. I think of the free T3 as the gas and the reverse T3 as the brake. So the free T3 gives you the energy, reverse T3 puts a stop to it. When stress is high, we convert more of that free T3 to the reverse T3, putting the brakes on your metabolic process, slowing you down, slowing your metabolism down, which we don't want, which hence you gain weight. Also, you can develop thyroid hormone resistance. This is something that happened to me. When you're stressed, you release inflammatory immune cells called cytokines, which make thyroid receptors less sensitive to thyroid hormones. This means that even if you're taking thyroid medication and your thyroid levels are normal, you can still be suffering and gaining weight from an underactive thyroid, which is exactly what happened to me. My levels were perfect on the labs, and I was converting into my reverse T3. I had thyroid resistance. I wasn't getting any of my thyroid hormones into the cells. So I was very hypothyroid, even though it looked like I was hyperthyroid on the lab work. Prolonged cortisol elevation can also cause excess estrogen to accumulate. This extra estrogen, of course, adds weight on your body as well. Excess estrogen increases levels of thyroid binding globulin, which is the protein that allows thyroid hormones to travel through your bloodstream. When thyroid hormones are attached to the thyroid binding globulin, they remain inactive once again, slowing down your metabolism and making weight loss impossible. When you have high cortisol, working out is actually pretty easy. But when you reach low levels, exercise is really hard and it's easy to become very lazy. On the flip side of that, if you try and work out when you have low cortisol, you're actually adding fuel to the fire because you're just taxing your adrenals even more. But yet, sitting around and not getting any exercise doesn't exactly help with weight loss, does it? So, another reason why you can't lose weight when you have cortisol dysfunction. Now, one more, your body always prioritizes cortisol production over all other hormones because it's our survival hormone. This prioritization is elegantly designed. Progesterone, estrogen, and testosterone are all hormones designed for the long-term reproductive survival of the species. Cortisol is about rescuing you and rescuing you like right now. If your body receives a hormonal message that there is some threat to you and cortisol remains high or chronically low, your body knows that it's probably not the best time to bring a baby into the world. So your body focuses its energy and resources on saving you and diverts its attention away from making hormones that specifically are for reproductive health. Progesterone can lower, as can estrogen and testosterone. And low levels of each of these hormones, you guessed it, can cause weight gain. So you can see there that when cortisol is high, your body will prioritize making cortisol, which can then create imbalance in all of your other sex hormones. When those sex hormones go haywire, that's when we start to see weight loss resistance and weight gain in many women. Now, as we go through into perimenopause, your ovaries stop making your sex hormones, and the job goes to the adrenal glands to make the little amount that you're going to make till you die, pretty much. Your ovaries shut down, the adrenals start to make that little bit of progesterone and estrogen and testosterone that you're supposed to be making. So, you know, testosterone is also made in the adrenals. So, it starts to prioritize the cortisol production instead of these other hormones. And so if you're stressed out when you're going through perimenopause, you're going to feel the effects of more perimenopausal symptoms than you were before, because your body's unable to make the necessary amounts of those hormones that can help you to sail through perimenopause without the symptoms. So once again, for short periods of time, these stressors are built into us for good reason and can really save us, so that, hey, things aren't great right now, we can't reproduce, we've got to prioritize our cortisol levels. But over time, this brilliant system that we have on the inside isn't built to cope with today's messy, stress-filled world. We used to live in villages where everyone shared the responsibilities of life, food, shelter, and survival. For most of the humans on the planet, most of the time, everyday life was pretty kind of like it is right now during the COVID-19 pandemic. We're all shut up on the insides of our houses with nothing to do. We do have our tablets and the internet, but in most cases, this is definitely, we're taking a lot of everyday stress off of us by being forced to stay at home and live this kind of, ho-hum life that we once did without the high speed of everything that is around us at all times in most cases. So throughout all of this, you can see the impact that high cortisol, it's not only contributing to every major health problem there is, and I mean a huge driving factor in cardiovascular disease and inflammation. They say cancer, Alzheimer's, all of these things, huge impact, diabetes, huge impact on our health when we don't control our stress levels. And what's interesting is most people do not realize that they have high stress, because this is This is life. Most people are living this life where they're being bombarded by artificial lighting. They are constantly on their screens. They've got the EMF waves going everywhere. They're eating toxic food that's putting stress on the system. They're eating foods that have hormones in them, which then mess up other hormones, which then mess up the cortisol levels. We've got constant stimulation. People drink too much. People eat too much. The list goes on, but this is what the norm is in today's society. It's normal for a woman to work 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, come home, clean her house, cook dinner, put the children to bed, have maybe an hour to herself. Maybe she'll actually stay up later just so she can have that just a couple hours to herself to watch a Netflix show. But then her sleep is shortened because she's up at 5, getting the kids ready for school and getting ready for work. And that perpetuation of stress isn't normal to our body, but yet we're all doing it. So it is so hard to see for so many people that they're actually living a stressful life. Back when I was having major weight loss resistance, when this all first happened to me after I had my child, I honestly thought, oh, I'm going to get my hormones checked and I'll probably have estrogen dominance. That was the only one that I could think of that I would have that explained all of my symptoms and why I couldn't lose weight. So when my test results came back and showed that I was really low in both DHEA, which is another stress hormone, and cortisol, I knew that there was much more to what was going on than I thought. And I was like, what? I'm not a stressed out person. I thought the stressed out person was just, I don't know what I thought, but I just thought that it was like not who I was. I thought it was the person that was maybe like, go, go, go 24/7, high stress job. Like I was a massage therapist. I was a single mom. I was doing everything. But to me, it just was normal. And my body did not think it was normal. And I mean, for sure, mine was like an accumulation of the 10 years prior of partying and not sleeping and being hard on my system. And it was just kind of pregnancy was the breaking point for my body where it was like, yeah, this isn't cool anymore. We're going to start driving this down now. And since then, I've discovered I've got heavy metal toxicity. And so it's like, how long have I had that? Is this part of it? Which I'm sure it is. And I think once I clear that up, my cortisol levels will probably go back to more normal levels. But point being is I want you to take the next week to really take a look at your life. You're at home right now. You're not allowed to go out. So if you're listening to this at a later point in time where, thank goodness, the COVID-19 isolation is going to be done. Oh, I can't wait to get to that day. But when it is done, even if you're listening to this, still take the next week to really think about where your stress levels are at. Let's be honest with ourselves. Where, out of all those things that I talked about, what could be impacting you? All of them? Couple of them? And then next week, I'm going to go over all the tools and tactics and things that you probably never really thought about before when it comes to controlling your stress levels and on every level, not just like, hey, let's go meditate for 20 minutes a day and think that our stress levels are going to just be fantastic, which, don't get me wrong, that should be part of it. But there's much more to it than that, ladies. So that will be part 2 next week, because if I keep going on this podcast, I think it's just going to stress you out farther. So I'm breaking it up into 2. For now, wherever you are in the world, stay healthy, try to stay sane through this crazy time, and I promise it will end and we will get on with our lives. Until then, have a great day, and I will talk to you next week. I hope you enjoyed today's show. New episodes come out every Thursday, so be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of them. You can also find me at KarenMartel.com, and you can get free recipes and weight loss tips by following me on Instagram and Facebook at Karen Martel Nutrition.